Hey, third grade, this is lesson 7.8, part 2. So how we finished our class yesterday was we were looking at our open response problem about finding rules to order fractions. And I feel like this was a lot for you to try before learning a little bit about comparing fractions that have the same numerator. So as long as you tried your best, that's all we want. But what I want you to do now is I want you to open up that open response problem while you're watching this video so that if you want to go back and change your answers, you can do that as well, okay? So this was what you were looking at. You were thinking about these fractions on this problem and for this problem, and your job was to order them from the least to the greatest. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Before we look at some student examples, I want to give you a few little pointers, and then I want you to pause the video and go back and look at your work to make sure that you are happy with your answer, okay? So for this one, when the numerators are the same, you're really looking at the denominators, and think of it in terms of pizza slices. So if you have a pizza that's sliced into eighths compared to a pizza that's sliced into fourths, your pieces are going to be bigger for the fourths because there's less of them. So look here, this is what 3/8 would look like compared to 3/4. So 3/4 is a lot bigger than the 3/8 because the slices are bigger. So the larger your denominator is, the smaller your slice is. Okay, so that's how you compare them when you're looking at just the denominator. The numerator is the same for both of them. Same here with 1/8 and 1/4. I would rather have a slice that's 1/4 than 1/8 because it's going to be bigger. Here's another way to think about it. When you have the same numerator on the top, the smaller denominator is going to be the greater fraction, okay? Because look here, 3/4 is greater than 3/6. 3 is the same, the numerator is the same, but look at the denominator. The fourths is going to be greater than the sixth because the fourths are larger pieces. So I'm going to say it again. The smaller the denominator is, the greater the fraction. So if both of the numerator numbers are the same, so say it's 3/8 and 3/6, which one would be greater, 3/8 or 3/6? It would be 3/6 because it's the smaller denominator. If you have the same denominator on the bottom, it is the opposite. The larger the numerator is, the greater the fraction is, okay? But we're focusing on the top part, the same numerator on top. So remember, the larger the denominator is, the smaller the fraction is, okay? So with that in mind, so knowing that the smaller the denominator is, the greater the fraction is, I want you to go back and I want you to look at your open response problems, and I want you to think about your order that you have, okay? So you are ordering these with all of the same numerator as 1, and these all of the same numerator as 2. So remember, if you have, like it says here, the smaller denominator, the bigger the fraction is. So look at these examples. The smaller the denominator, the greater the fraction is. So remember, you're going from least to greatest, okay? So reevaluate your work. That's a part of day 2 lessons, is to revise and edit. So I want you to go back, I want you to check your work, and then start the video again when you're ready to look at some examples. All right, so this is our first student work we are going to look at, okay? So this student did 1/10, 1/8, 1/6, 1/5, 1/4, 1/3, 1/2. Do you agree with this student? Do you agree with this student? Yes, this student is correct. This is the least, this is the greatest. So they ordered them from least to greatest. And then it says, what patterns do you notice? How are these fractions the same or different? This student said they all have 1s in the numerator. That is definitely something that they all have the same. What other patterns might we talk about for this problem? Maybe something that you mentioned. What other patterns might we talk about? So another one that we could have said is that the fractions are in order from least to greatest, like it asked, but look at the denominators. They're from greatest to least, because remember back here, it says that the smaller the denominator, the greater the fraction. So another pattern we could talk about is how the denominators are in order from greatest to least. Okay. Then it says part 2. They put it 2/10, 2/8, 2/6, 2/5, 2/4, 2/3. Okay. So do we agree with this one? Do we agree with this one? Yep, we would agree with this one because if you look here, they are going down again. 10, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3. And it says they all have the numerator 2. Okay, they all have the numerator 2. So we could say that this one was correct. They were able to place them in the order from greatest to least. Now let's look at another student. So let's look at child B. So this is child B's work, okay? So they did 1/10, 1/8, 1/6, 1/5, 1/4, 1/3, 1/2. So we saw that they also did this for this problem. And then it says in fractions, the higher numerator is less than. Okay, so they're trying to talk about how the numerator is going from the same, but the denominator is going from higher to less than. So it's going from 10 to 2. So 10 to 2. So it's going from the highest to the least. Okay. And then here they have 2/10, 2/8, 2/6, 2/5, 2/4, and 2/3. And this, we think with this one, the child saw that the fractions with higher denominators are less than fractions with smaller denominators, but we can't quite be sure because they didn't explain completely. They didn't, explain all of their work. They just drew what they saw, which here it looks like it's supposed to be 2/10 and here it's supposed to be 2/3. So they were drawing that they think that this would be a less than number, this would be a greater than number. But again, without words, we can't quite understand exactly what they were trying to say. So how can we make it clearer? We could say that the child could say that the denominator instead of the number, and then that the pattern works for fractions with the same numerator. Okay, so that is sample child B. So again, double check your work, go back through and revise and edit as you are going through this problem. Now, the last part of your question was write a rule for ordering fractions with the same numerator. So this is a part that you're probably going to revise as we go through this. Okay, so write a rule for ordering fractions with the same numerator, what we've been doing. So I'm going to show you a few examples of children's work that they were doing for the ordering of the fractions, okay? So the first one says, if you are ordering the fractions from least to greatest, then you look for the fraction that has the biggest denominator and then do that until you get to the smallest one. So just like what we've been talking about, the least is going to have the greatest denominator. The greatest is going to have the least denominator. So it's kind of working backwards, okay? This one says, the rule for ordering any set of fractions with the same numerator, the higher denominator is the smallest fraction. Same thing, going back to thinking of like the pizza. The higher denominator is going to be the smallest fraction. So if I cut something into eighths compared to fourths, the eighths piece is going to be a lot smaller than the fourths piece. And that's what this student was trying to get across. And then for the last one, this one is going to look at, does this work clearly tell the order of the fractions, and do you agree with the rule? So it says the one with the highest denominator is the least. The second highest denominator will be the second smallest or the second least, and so on. For example, and then they gave an example, 511, 510, 59, 58, 57, 56, 55, 54, 53, 52, 51. And they wrote, this is the smallest and this is the biggest. And they said, and it works every time. This rule applies for ordering any set of fractions with the same numerator. So this student did a really nice job because they wrote the correct steps and they, we agree with their work. So 5/11ths compared to 5/1 or 5/2 is going to be smaller than those other fractions, okay? And they make it clear that it's for a fraction with the same numerator. You need to make sure you include that so that people know what rule they can use when they have the same numerator. An example can help others understand the rule and why it works. So adding that example in there is another great idea because then they can see you applying that rule and then use that to help them solve their work. So now that you've seen a couple examples, we did these where we talked about comparing with the same numerator. I want you to go back and I want you to reevaluate your work. If you've already turned it into your teacher, just hit unsubmit so you can edit your work. And make sure that you are going through these 3 problems where you're ordering them from the least to the greatest. Remember, look at the denominator, and then you're writing a rule for ordering fractions. If you want to go back through and listen to this part of the video again, you can. These are great examples of how you can explain your rule. Good job, guys.